Hi, Promise Fellows. This is Noam, Noam's Training Development and Evaluation Director, and I just want to outline kind of the unique pieces that you'll be engaging throughout this year in each one of your trainings. And as you soon to find out, we'll delve into more depth on each one of these concepts. But just to start out, do you think about the special things that you're about to do that a student needs to qualify? So, baseline is whether it's through attendance and uh, or the student engagement instrument, essentially like a self-reported survey about how I feel about school. A student would qualify for support services. And then from that, you will get grounding in your training. You'll have more relationship building strategies and motivational interviewing concepts that happen by week 2. If you're watching this as a 9-1 start, you are the only unique folks that will have all of this in like 3 days back to back. Otherwise, if you're watching this later in the year, you had your welcome activity and your live training will be about a week ish later, where you have a Wednesday and Friday where you're doing kickoff. And then after all of that is when you are doing the last bit of unique piece. So you'll be trained on some relationship strategies and motivational interviewing. And then after you have a relationship with a student, doing that survey, like how do you feel about school? And that happens, 2 to 3 weeks, at least 2 to 3 weeks after you've had a chance to make a relationship with them. And then you'll have more training throughout the year. So this is kind of like also like the overarching timeline of everything. Every Promise Fellow starts with establishment, maintain, restore. And effectively, it's making sure that relationally that students don't fall through the cracks and that you have strategies. And we're all products of our past experiences. So here's some research-driven strategies in order to make relationships, keep them going, or when and if a relationship gets broken or is strained, that you have ways in order to help that relationship. And we want to make sure, I'm only going to dive into the how of this. I'll have feedback throughout your trainings where you can do some self-reflection in a Google form to essentially say how these supports are going, just to make sure that we're all being reflective practitioners. And finally, for like the relationship part of this, as you start making relationships, there was a National Institute Justice study that indicated that virtually no incidents of school violence had occurred by individuals who felt valued, respected, and a sense of belonging. So a lack of belonging is considered a root cause for problems that young people experience. So essentially, we're starting with relationships because we know relationships matter. And I'd argue that most likely you took this role because you like investing in relationships. And I'll link to the document in the next slide, but essentially have a support guide of like ways to make relationships and kind of a decision tree that you're looking at right now. Like, do you already have a relationship that's characterized by a sense of trust, respect, and connection? Yes or no? And quite literally, you have like choices as you go down, so that way you can try to do your best to match relationship strategies. And build out your repertoire of ways in order to make relationships with students, keep them going, and repair them. So here in a second, I'm going to pop up a link to the Google site, but you could take a few minutes in order to check it out. This will also be in your live virtual kickoff training. All right, so after you've started with relationships and you feel like you have a relationship, if you yourself are the Promise Fellow that's just going to be doing SEIs one-on-one with students, I'm asking everyone wait until they have a relationship in order to do it, so that way a student feels safe. Some sites will be doing this grade-wide or school-wide or community center-wide, in which case it might have already been happening and it's not something that's just you yourself are doing. But anyway you go, students will be doing the survey about how they think and feel about school. So we use a check and connect survey called the Student Engagement Instrument, and it was developed by the doctors above. And essentially it gets to those I3 or different statements at the bottom. So there's 3 I feel statements, like how do I feel about my teacher? Student relationships, how do I feel about my peer support? How do I feel about my family support? going into like more of those like cognitive or like I think statements, like what do I, how relevant is schoolwork? How much goal setting do I have? How motivated am I? So effectively, a student can share on that, and that can help qualify them either from like how they feel to like what they think about school, aka attitudes and perceptions of school. You'll get more training on this in the live one, but right now here's a link to the student engagement instrument on the Google site. All right, so you started with building relationships. Once you felt like you had a relationship with a student, probably 2 to 3 weeks in, if you're doing it just by yourself, then you're able to give the survey to a student to have them share how they think or feel about school. And then from there, now that you most likely have a relationship and their perception of school, then this is when we'll start doing some MOOC goal setting. And I don't have a lot of information on MOOC goal setting. I'll pause and put a video up after this, so that way you can watch a 5-minute video, I believe, on kind of like the science behind. But essentially, this is mental contrasting with implementation intent. Essentially, you engaging students in sharing what they want, and also like what's getting in the way that they have control over, and kind of before things happen, like helping them like create a plan, so that way when something's hard and in the moment's happening, they've already kind of figured out some version of a solution, as opposed to having to wrestle with it in the moment. So we'll do some training on this, but after your 101 training, you'll be expected to start engage with students on like goal setting, on and or like rechecking in on goals. So on creating goals or revisiting goals, I should say. So with all of that, here's my contact information. If you have any questions, please reach out.